Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of the Hey Horka Notre Dame football blueandgold.com, Blue and Gold Illustrated message board mailbag podcast. That's a mouthful, but we have plenty more words where those came from. I'm with my coworker and colleague and co-host, as usual, Jack Sobel. Jack, we're 1 week into Notre Dame football fall camp. How are you doing, man? How are you feeling?
I'm doing great. We are, I think, 4th, 6th of the way of the practices that we'll see. So 2/3 for those who understand math like I don't. And I'm feeling great. I think, Texas A&M can't come soon enough.
Yeah, remember to thumbs up on this video if you're watching live on YouTube or if you're watching after the fact on YouTube, and definitely subscribe to the channel. We're doing this now through the end of the football season and probably even into the off season. We're trying to make this a weekly staple, kind of like the show that you guys see with Mike Singer and Tim Hyde on Tuesday nights. Now we'll be doing this every Wednesday night. So what we do here, we take a couple questions. We're going to do 5 tonight from blueandgold.com message board subscribers. Some really good questions that they've asked. Like Jack said, we've seen 4 practices already. So this is kind of one of the more important one of these shows that we're going to do, Jack, I think, because it's really fresh on our minds since we talked last. We've seen 3 of those practices. When we did talk last week, we had only seen 1. Now, granted, that was a full practice, so a really important one. And to get those thoughts out fresh was very important. But I think in the last week or so, 6 days, and especially yesterday, we saw practice. So a lot of this info is going to be fresh on our minds. And being that we are 1 week in, Jack, I kind of posed this question to you probably 20 minutes before we hopped on air here. What's your favorite thing or something that sticks out, the thing that you keep going back to that you've seen in these 4 Notre Dame football practices that we've been able to watch as the media?
Well, I think the thing I keep coming back to is just watching Mike Denbrock on the practice field, both the intensity, the get set, so and so other words, but just like getting on the guys on offense, constantly to execute, even though he knows perfectly well that they were never going to be where they need to be right now. He's on the guys every play to execute. And then some of the instruction he's gotten, they did a drill showing the guys, right and wrong with running motion, just very, very basic stuff, but, real glimpse into Mike Denbrock's offensive philosophy and how he uses motion to win. And seeing that drill in action really brought a lot of that to light.
Yeah, I think I've said it on some of our videos that we tape and then put on this YouTube channel, probably even written it at blueandgold.com. His instruction on what to do in a drill that is nowhere close to full speed 11 on 11 is so impressive. Telling guys where to run routes, how to get off the line of scrimmage, how to, like you said, the pre-snap motion, I think, is going to be a huge thing in this Mike Denbrock offense. That's been very important. You got to teach that. Like some of these guys, Jaden Greathouse, the guys that you're going to see in motion, they might not have done that in high school. Jaden Greathouse was able to line up outside and go catch a football over pretty much everybody in high school. It's a little bit more difficult now. I've seen him in motion a ton in the first week of fall camp. And you can tell that he's trying to process it and learn it. And that's all coming from the top from Mike Denbrock. So I think that's been very impressive as well. The thing that I think has been, well, nobody's talking about this. So, Jack, here's one of your favorite questions. What do we need to talk about that nobody's talking about? Like you said, we talk about everything. To me, it's Riley Leonard's health, man. And I think this is a big, big thing because, Jack, when you go back to spring ball, and it was your first spring ball at Notre Dame, it was just dominated almost detrimentally by Riley Leonard's ankle and the fact that he had surgery on it and then had to have surgery on it again. And we didn't get to see him do something as simple as what you're watching on YouTube right now. Riley Leonard go through stretching lines with Gino Guidugli watching and Steve Angeli right by his side. You see Kenny Minchie in the shot as well. He didn't get to do much of this at all. I mean, he was standing off to the side with a big Takeo ankle brace on his ankle and just basically a non-participant. I know we made so much of the fact that he was participating in any way that he can. And in the bowl game, in the blue gold game, the spring game, he did a lot that other quarterbacks probably wouldn't have. But just the fact that he's done everything, Jack, to this point in fall camp, and cross your fingers, knock on wood, whatever you do as a superstition, hopefully that continues for him throughout fall camp and into that Texas A&M game. I think that's a pretty big deal. And that's sort of the biggest thing that I've kind of come away thinking is we're not talking about Riley Leonard's health, and that's a good thing for Notre Dame.
Well, he said it's not a surprise. I mean, he said multiple times over the summer that he's 100%. So obviously we were expecting this. But yes, it is still good to see him healthy. We've seen him running like he often does. In some of the practice clips, we didn't really see it at the practice we were at, just because of the nature of the practice. But no, he's 100% healthy. That is not an issue right now whatsoever. Certainly good to see from Riley Leonard.
Yeah, and I just will end this part, and we'll get to our questions with, you see it in the background of your video there. You are a Chicago Bulls fan, and the Derrick Rose thing is just like etched in everybody's mind who's a sports fan. I think when people say, man, some people are just injury prone, for people our age, and I know you're a little younger than me, I think of Derrick Rose because he was one of the best players, if not the best player in the NBA, won an MVP award, right?
Yes. Yep. The year before the first injury happened. Yep.
Yeah. And then after the injuries started piling up, he just was never the same. So obviously Riley Leonard's a 21-year-old kid, whatever it is. You're not going to compare him to Derrick Rose in that way. But as soon as you have an injury that kind of sustained and prolonged as long as it did for him, I think there were people on our message board who were a little bit worried about that. Now that he's healthy, though, they're worried about his production in the season because that is a tangible, you can see it in the future thing. What's he going to look like against Texas A&M? How is he going to hold up in these home games that he should be putting up really big numbers in? What if he doesn't put up the big numbers? Does that get in his head in the wrong way? So our first question, Jack, is kind of setting expectations for Riley Leonard. How good of a year do you think he can actually have at Notre Dame in his 1-year rental season?
So I think the expectation, the base level expectation should be that he's much better in November than he is in August 31st. I had a column about this. It'll be up online probably during game week, but it's in the magazine right now. But he doesn't have too much time to get comfortable in this offense before A&M. And I mean, that's where those reps in the spring really would have come in handy. And obviously, I mean, he was throwing a ton with the guys in the summer. We all know about the Fairhope trip, but the spring reps, I think, matter. I think in a new offense with all new weapons on a new team, it would be unfair to expect perfection in week 1 against Texas A&M. I do think that Riley Leonard is the kind of kid who's gonna, even if he doesn't have a great game against A&M, he's gonna bounce back from that. And I think he's just gonna get progressively better over the course of the season. And I think that's why I've been kind of banging the drum. Like, you survive A&M, a few pretty easy games coming up, and then you have a lot of time to really get this offense right. Because it's not just Riley that I think is gonna improve over the season. It's the wide receivers playing with him. And kind of growing into their roles. A lot of them are in expanded roles. It's the offensive tackles, which I'm sure we'll get into more at some point in the show. And it's all the moving parts that have come together. Should get better over the course of the season. Riley Leonard, most of all.
Jack, what makes you think that we're going to talk about offensive tackles in this show? What's going on with them?
Yeah.
What's going on with them this week? We've seen some of your comments, so if you are watching live with us, definitely put some more of those in. I was not ignoring you, Paul, when you said, why all this doom and gloom about the injury? Could it be something that catapults Tosh Baker forward? Hey, look, man, the only reason that Joe Alt became Joe Alt is because Blake Fisher got injured. And I'm not saying that's going to happen again, but you never know. I put that on my Hey Horka thread earlier, Jack, was like, you never know what this Charles Jackasaw injury means for Charles. It ended up working out for Blake Fisher, but what does it mean for Tosh Baker? Or we're going to talk about Anthony Knapp and some other guys in that conversation as well. But getting back to the Riley Leonard thing, let's go the statistical route with this, Jack. I'm looking at Sam Hartman's numbers from last year. Played 12 games, obviously, sat out the Sun Bowl. He was 191 for 301. That's 63.5%. I think Riley Leonard would take that. I don't have his stats in front of me, but I'll get them pulled up. I'm not sure Riley Leonard's ever completed 63.5% of his passes in any season at Duke. Almost 700 yards for Hartman with 24 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Am I crazy to think that like the Sam Hartman season has a little bit of a negative connotation attached to it, Jack, because of what happened against Louisville and what happened against Clemson? He was not particularly good in either of those football games. He didn't really throw the ball around a lot against Ohio State either. That was a little bit of a slog. But because of those games, you negatively remember what Sam Hartman was at Notre Dame. But am I crazy to say, like, we'll get to the running ability of Riley Leonard in a minute, because I think that's a huge factor in all of this. But if Riley Leonard had those numbers, Jack, we're fine with that, right? Especially if Notre Dame goes 10-2 or 11-1. That's probably the ultimate qualifier in that.
Yeah, I think comparing him to Sam Hartman, honestly, I don't think is fair to either quarterback, because Leonard is obviously a completely different player in a completely different situation. I mean, Notre Dame expects, we've seen this in fall camp. The receivers are better. The receivers are much better, and better can't be the bar, because last year they were among the worst wide receiver groups in the Power Five. I think everyone agrees in that by this point. So better can't be the bar, but they're definitely better with the potential to be more than that. And I think Riley, he's a guy who at Duke spread the ball around. He is a guy who likes to take advantage of the quick game, which I think plays well into these receivers' hands. I think there's a lot of good quick passing guys, be it Faison, Greathouse, Jaden Harrison. And I think that really plays into Riley's hands, whereas Sam Hartman last year, not that he really had the personnel to run it, he was more of a deep ball guy. He definitely didn't have the personnel to do that. So I don't know. This is why I don't like numerical projections, because there are so many factors at play. Like, what if Notre Dame wins in a blowout 10 of 12 games and Riley Leonard doesn't play in 10 of 12 fourth quarters? So who knows? But I think the winning games aspect, I mean, QB wins, we can argue about that all day, but the winning, he's going to be judged on how many games he wins, and that's just the fact of the matter of a one-year transfer quarterback. I mean, that was the case with Sam Hartman, and it's going to be the case with Riley Leonard.
You hit the nail on the head with who he's throwing the ball to, and it feels like a Notre Dame tight end pops up on the Biletnikoff Award watch list every single preseason, because it's been Michael Mayer. Probably not last year, because Mitchell Evans wasn't Mitchell Evans yet, but now he is. Yeah. So here's Mitchell Evans. I think the difference is you're actually seeing a wide receiver pop up alongside of a tight end, and like Chris Mitchell is being thought about as a guy who can be that dude. I know you put it on social media over the weekend, and it's a quote that we kept coming back to in our talk with Mike Denbrock over the offseason was, who's the dude? Not sure. And now in fall camp, we get to speak to him, and he says, maybe Chris Mitchell is that dude. Like, only a couple practices in, and he said, okay, maybe we're getting closer to naming him that guy. But, Mike Singer put it on our message board the other day, and I believe a thread that you had, and he said, hey, maybe Bo Collins is that guy. And that's not far-fetched to say. Like, it could be him. Do we see the best year of Jaden Thomas's career? Deion Coley had a couple nice catches. Like, I don't think he's that dude, but he can be that dude on a couple plays, and we didn't even see that last year. I think he had one catch last year, Jack, or like 4 catches.
Coley, he had 3 all in the Navy game.
You can count on one hand how many catches Deion Coley had. If he stays healthy, I don't think we're doing that again, especially not in a Mike Denbrock's offense. And all of that is playing right into Riley Leonard's hands. And now we need to take the conversation another direction. The dude can run. Okay.
Yes.
And I talked to Riley Mills earlier this week. I believe it was Tuesday. And he was asked about Riley Leonard. And I know that you've been standing around players in fall camp interviews, Jack, where they've been asked about Riley Leonard. So I'll ask you in a minute, what have you heard? Or does a specific quote stand out to you? But the one for me was yesterday, where Riley Mills, he shows up on Bruce Feldman's freak list. Like, he is a crazy good defensive tackle. We all know that. Probably going to play at the next level. Going to hear his name in the NFL draft. And that's because of his strength. Okay, but he can run. Like, he can get out there, and I trust Riley Mills to chase down a quarterback or somebody that's trying to get to the sideline a lot more than a lot of other defensive tackles. And Riley Mills said it. Riley Leonard will run away from you. And I think a big example of that Jack, was last year. Was it Riley Leonard ran away from Benjamin Morrison on the sideline in the Notre Dame game and was running away from Jordan Botelho. I think he was getting angled off by a safety, and Botelho eventually caught him. But Botelho was probably thinking in his mind the same thing that Riley Mills was telling me yesterday. Man, I do not want to have to chase this guy around. Like when I'm staring at number 13 on his back, it's not a good thing for us. So I think you're going to see that a lot if he stays healthy for Notre Dame. And like you said, who cares about the numbers that he might put up? All you have to know is Riley Leonard can run and he will run. If he's running at the right time, if he's not leaving the pocket too early, all those different things that can be a little bit of a hindrance, I think he's going to have a pretty special season. Not to the level of like a Jaden Daniels at LSU, but like he can do some of those things in a Mike Denbrock offense with his legs that Daniels did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned, people we've talked to. I asked Billy Schrouth. I spent a little time with him yesterday, and I got the quote pulled up. Like, what advantages or challenges does having Riley Leonard moving in out of the pocket so much create? He abstained from the challenges angle. I wasn't trying to lead him to bash his teammate. Of course, I was trying to lead him to say like, well, you might have to block for longer, and that creates some challenges for a lineman. But with the advantages part, he said some really insightful stuff. Like, number one, the defense can't just line up and sprint through your face to try to get him. You defensive tackles and ends have to be much more mindful of their gap responsibility, and that hinders the pass rush just by having him there. It opens up stuff with the run game, obviously. Because the zone read game, the quarterback run game, there's a lot more creative stuff you can do there. And that creates advantageous angles for linemen to block as well. The third thing, and this is really important, like he diminishes what you can do as a defensive coordinator. Like you can't really send overload pressure nearly as much because he's just going to run the other way. So from an offensive lineman's perspective, I thought that was super interesting, like what Leonard brings to the table and what he's brought in fall camp. And I think we should finish this conversation with we actually have evidence of Riley Leonard playing an 11-on-11 action in Notre Dame uniform, and he looked pretty much like the guy he was at Duke. The rushing is there. The really impressive sideline throws are there. Hit a couple deep balls to Jaden Thomas. Little inconsistent with the accuracy, and I mean that's where we come back to like we think he's going to get better over the course of the season because he's got a baseline. We know he's good. Over the course of the season, he can become great. We're not going to see that in fall camp, mainly because we're not going to see much fall camp beyond this. But I think eventually you're going to see some improvement over the course of the season.
Yeah, if there's any reason to temper your expectations on him, and I think a lot of people have, like nobody's falling into that trap of Riley Leonard's going to be a Heisman, just like they were. I think there were T-shirts for Sam Hartman at this time last year. Like we're not doing that again this year. If you're going to temper your expectations, it's because of some of those like short passes that make, I don't know, the Caleb Williams of the world who they are, or like the season Bo Nix had, or Michael Penix, thinking about some of these recent really good quarterbacks. In the film study that we did over the offseason, Jack, Riley Leonard missed too many of those to say like, oh, he's as good as that guy, or he's a top 5 quarterback. So if that gets better and all those other things that we just talked about happen, you're probably talking about a top 10 quarterback in college football. I think he's got that kind of potential. So, and if he's knocking on the top 5, Notre Dame is knocking on the top 5 of teams in the country, and they're going to have a serious shot to make some noise in a college football playoff. So we hinted that we were going to talk a little bit about the offensive tackles. That is where we are going next. How can you not mention that Charles Jagasaw is out for the season with a right torn pectoral muscle, and that's kind of opened up a can of worms for Notre Dame football fans, even though, Jack, we were literally standing in the presence of Joe Rudolph on Tuesday, and he said, I think Tosh Baker is the answer for us at left tackle. We saw it in 30 minutes of practice prior to that. Baker playing the left, Emil Wagner playing the right, middle of the offensive line, as we have seen it since July 31st when fall camp opened up. And yet, Jack, people are still asking us this question on the message board. Who do you think ends up playing left tackle by the end of the season? Is it Tosh Baker or the field? That is from KCNDMIS97 on the blueandgold.com message board. I'll throw it to you. You can answer this, Baker or the field, and then give us why, or you can make it a little more convoluted than that. I don't care. Go whatever direction you want.
I mean, it's tough. Honestly, if I'm not a betting man, I definitely can't bet on this. But if I were a betting man, I'd probably bet the field. I think obviously they're going to say all the right things about Tosh Baker. The coaches and players are going to say the right things about Tosh Baker. And for what we can say about Tosh Baker, it is really, really admirable that he stayed the whole time. He could have left. He could have left after Joe Alt passed him and Blake Fisher passed him. He could have left. Throughout 2 years as a backup, he could have left after losing the competition in the spring. So obviously, I mean that's super admirable. And he was always going to be quality depth. But now that he's forced into action as a starter, we have to take a look at while Joe Rudolph did say, confident in Tosh, we believe in Tosh. He also said that Emil Wagner, convincingly, I think it was considerably and noticeably was better than Tosh Baker in spring practice. And the speed with which Baker won that is, to be honest, a little concerning to me. On the end of Tosh, did I say Baker? I mean, the speed with which Wagner won that is a little bit concerning to me. And I don't think the sky is falling. There's plenty of great pieces for Notre Dame on this offense, but it's definitely a problem. We thought offensive tackle would be a problem before this happened, and now they lost their best offensive tackle. And I mean, the PFF data does not like Baker. The eye test from what we've seen in practice does not like Baker. It's there's obviously no one to replace him right now. I think Anthony Knapp for now is the swing tackle, the freshman. Gerby Lambert is behind because he was a summer enrollee, but you could conceivably see, if Baker falters sooner, then Knapp would get the first shot. If Gerby Lambert develops over the course of the season, which I think is a realistic possibility, because he's certainly physically ready to go, they could, be dissatisfied with Baker down the line and say, you know what, Gerby, you're ready. And if anything, that could be more about Lambert than it is about Baker. But I don't think I'm not discounting Tosh Baker from, becoming a quality tackle. It's just we haven't seen that in the last 4 years. So I will very tentatively take the field here.
I'm going to take the field, and I'm going to do it pretty confidently, honestly, because there's just something, and this was before the Charles Jagasaw injury, in my mind that was telling me if you're a fifth-year Notre Dame offensive lineman and it hasn't happened for you yet, it's probably not just going to magically happen for you like that. Just snap my fingers if you couldn't hear that at home. Look, it took an injury to Notre Dame's number one tackle option. Like Charles Jagasaw was it. We heard Marcus Freeman talk about that really since December. I know that he lauded him in the spring and then even in that May conversation I think we had with him, but I pulled up some comments that he had about Charles Jagasaw in December, and he said, we just saw something in recruitment with him. And then even because you have to remember that when he got to campus, he was banged up with a knee, and he just was not an option. Everyone thought, okay, he's going to be it at some point, but with this knee injury and what we have at tackle right now, and that was Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, Charles Jagasaw wasn't going to play tackle last year, and he ended up playing tackle last year in the Sun Bowl and played really well. And Marcus Freeman said, hey, this is what we thought, and it's happening now, and it's going to happen in 2024. It's a bummer that it's not going to happen in 2025 for him, but it's also a little concerning for Notre Dame that it took that to happen for Tosh Baker to actually get into a number one tackle role. Because like you said, Jack, I'm going to introduce two quotes to this conversation, and one is the one that you alluded to. This was from Joe Rudolph just a day ago. It was that Emil outplayed him, being Baker, in the spring, like he just played better than him, consistently and noticeably better than him. He kind of made that clear. And this was in the midst of saying, hey, but we still believe in Baker and yada, yada. So there's a lot swirling around here. But this is a quote that was also said by Joe Rudolph, and I'll read it as this picture of Anthony Knapp comes up. Not many freshmen come in and can play like that, especially against this defense. That's Joe Rudolph talking about Anthony Knapp. So why I'm taking the field, they're talking about Anthony Knapp that way right now, and that's impressive. And I put this on the message board, Jack. if Anthony Knapp can do this as an early enrollee, and literally all it takes is just like being there for a couple extra months and going through the spring and then getting comfortable, Jack, I have a really strong inclination that at some point, say October or November, you hope it's October, you hope it's September if you're a Notre Dame fan. I think Gerby Lambert is going to be comfortable enough to play college football at some point in this football season, and get onto the field, he's going to have to play better than Anthony Knapp now. And obviously, Tosh Baker is going to have to show that he's not the guy. Like right now, he's going to have his shot against Texas A&M, and if it doesn't happen there for him, he could get yanked as soon as Northern Illinois or Miami, Ohio, Purdue, like one of those games. But there's a couple freshmen knocking on the door. Here's the other concerning thing to me, though, Jack, and I don't know how you feel about this. I don't think Ty Chan is there. Styles Prescott is another one of those freshmen. He was never going to play until his sophomore or junior year was probably the timeline for him. Like, you have Baker, you have Wagner, you have the freshmen that are showing that maybe they can play right now, but beyond that, it's like, man, I don't know. And you still don't even know about those freshmen either. So I'm taking the field, but like you said, it's a little reluctantly, because are these freshmen actually going to be able to do it this year? I'm not sure. You're kind of taking a chance at that point.
Yeah, well, I want to harken back to last year, Charles Jagasaw, around this time last year. Like, he was injured, probably a little overweight, a summer enrollee as well.
Admittedly overweight.
Admittedly overweight, a summer enrollee as well. Like, he was, I think, well behind where Gerby Lambert is right now. And they deemed Jagasaw their best remaining offensive tackle on the roster after Joe Alt and Blake Fisher left in December, and that was just a few months later. And again, like, so to answer Rick's question, if you want to put it up there, does it speak more to Wagner progressing or Baker digressing or regressing? Like, I think both. I think that, like, back in December, they immediately determined that Charles Jagasaw was the best remaining tackle. Like, that was within the first week of bowl practice. And then they had a competition between Wagner and Baker. Baker won. He started the Sun Bowl, did fine. And then in spring, Baker's with the first team again, so Wagner's not quite ready there. Then that's where Wagner passes them. It feels like over the course of the offseason, or really since bowl season began, they've been kind of goading Emil Wagner along, like, you can pass this guy. They've been waiting for Wagner to take that step, and he has, and Wagner's looked really good in fall camp. I'd be pretty confident in Emil Wagner right now. But it's just that, again, they're saying all the right things, but yeah, they've spoken highly of Wagner for a while. And they're just waiting for him to do that, and he has over the offseason. So I don't know how I don't feel particularly confident in Baker right now. Again, they obviously have to play him against A&M because you cannot put a true freshman offensive tackle out there. But I think Anthony Knapp is a really good football player. I don't know whether he's going to end up at tackle or guard or center. When he came in, he said he was working at right tackle and center. But he can play both tackle spots, which is big because they will need him to if either of them get hurt. So I don't know if he's going to start at some point this year, but he's going to start for this team at some point in the near future. I feel pretty confident in that.
I'm going to take two things that you said as we round out this conversation. I don't think it's about Baker regressing at all.
Oh, no, not at all either. Yeah.
I think Baker is just who he is, and he's been who he is, and it's about Emil Wagner progressing to a point past that. And we saw that with the reps that we saw in fall camp before the Jagasaw injury.
Correct.
The second thing that I want to pull from is you can't start a true freshman tackle at Texas A&M. Notre Dame started a true freshman tackle at Florida State in 2021. I know Blake Fisher was, the consensus was he's ready. He's ready to go. And I think I literally got here that summer. I think he was an early enrollee. I mean, we can check on that, but maybe that we can trust the staff as well. Did Blake Fisher get here in the summer, Chet?
I believe I wasn't here, but I believe he was an early enrollee from what I have read about that.
So I mean that obviously helps, and I keep going back in my mind since the Jagasaw injury. If all it takes is just a few months of seeing it and being there, I think Gerby Lambert's going to get it. Anthony Knapp, nobody expected Anthony Knapp to get it, and he's getting it. So that's why I'm taking the field in this question, in this conversation. So we're going to move that along, and we're talking about Texas A&M and whether or not you can put a tackle out there, true freshman tackle. How are you feeling about this Texas A&M game after watching a few Notre Dame practices, Jack? Better, worse? I think I'm feeling a little bit worse because of the Jagasaw news. I'm not going to lie to you there, but I also said on the message board, I'm not going to let one guy that does not even touch the football dictate how I feel that game is going to go. Now, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart Shepard. I have these all these different names in my head.
Shamar Turner is the interior guy who's lined up on the edge a lot in the past. Shamar Stewart is the edge rusher.
Shamar Stewart is the one I was talking about. They might be able to hurt Notre Dame a little bit more than you thought they were because Jagasaw is not playing. You're going to have somebody step up at that tackle position. But just talking about what we've seen from Notre Dame, Jack, you feel better about their the Irish's chances in College Station? Do you feel worse? I'll let you speak on this. I will preface it though with, I think I feel about the same.
Yeah, I feel about the same as well. I will push back actually on one thing you said, the doesn't touch the ball thing. I think that the starting left tackle is more important than many of the players who do touch the ball. So I certainly feel worse about their chances after the Jagasaw injury. I think it's impossible not to. But again, based on what we've seen in fall practice, like it's been about what we expected. The defensive line is super good, particularly on the interior. The linebackers are we'll talk about the linebackers in a bit. But the linebackers are super versatile, super athletic. The secondary is really, really good, and they have the ability to do a lot of different things with them. Riley Leonard looks about like he did at Duke. The running backs are a great 1-2 tandem, and they're going to do a ton of different stuff with Jeremiah Love. The wide receivers are better. The offensive line is a work in progress. Like none of what we've seen is surprising. So I think it's, it's hard to say we feel better or worse, but I mean, we can say we feel worse because of the Jagasaw injury.
Yeah, a couple of things here. One from Ta or TA, whoever you are. Low scoring game. I tend to agree. I'm not going to say my score prediction that we turned in for the issue of Blue and Gold Illustrated that literally just was sent out today. Has a beautiful cover on it. Mike Elko, Riley Leonard. Go to Blue Gold online to order a single copy or start a subscription. I'll put it up here in a minute. But I also agree with this. Defense travels. And I think, Jack, that is what Notre Dame is going to have to really lean into in this game, because you alluded to the column that you wrote for that magazine issue that I was literally just talking about. And with all of the talk about it, I might as well throw it up here right now. Beautiful, beautiful cover.
It's an excellent cover. One of my favorites, if not the favorite since I've gotten here.
And it plays so well because I had the chance to write the feature and you did the on paper, kind of the matchups. If you're a Blue and Gold avid reader, you know what we're talking about there. But my preview was so much about Mike Elko and Riley Leonard because I think this game is so much about that. It's about a new Notre Dame offense led by Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard against Mike Elko and his new Texas A&M team and defense. And the fact that they were together at Duke for 2 seasons, pretty remarkable that we're getting this in the first game of the season. But going back to what I was saying, I think Notre Dame's going to have to lean hard into that defense that you were just talking about, because the offense that you wrote about for that magazine I just showed y'all, I don't think we're going to see the best version of that thing until like show me. It's going to be awesome to go back and see what Notre Dame looked like against Florida State. And let's just say that they have good to, average to good games against Florida State and Texas A&M. Notre Dame's average to good against Florida State is going to be so much better than its average to good against Texas A&M. But I think Notre Dame's good defensively to great, or good to great defensively against Florida State, is going to be more or less the same as what it can do against Texas A&M. Like the defense travels thing, guinea pig clips. Notre Dame's defense traveled against Ohio State 2 seasons ago when they had to go in there and face CJ Stroud and all those weapons at his disposal and held down that unit. And part of this, look at what Ohio State did or did not do against Notre Dame in that game. And then against the eventual national champion Georgia Bulldogs in the Peach Bowl or whatever it was. I think that game was into the 40s and it came down to a field goal. Like offenses take a while to get going, and especially at the college football level. Notre Dame's defense should be good from the start. And if it has a chance to jump all over Texas A&M, a team that's in transition, Colin Klein, new offensive coordinator, Connor Wegman, we haven't seen a lot of him at the college level, jump over all over those guys. And I think Notre Dame's going to do that. And getting back to the question, what have you seen in the practices? That's what I've seen, a defense and a defensive coordinator. We got to speak to Al Golden recently. That's going to be able to just go out there and say, hey, we have these guys. They can do these things to your guys, and we can dictate this game in your building in front of 100,000 people because of that. So that's what I'm comfortable in from watching these Notre Dame practices, Jack, is that you can roll out a really good to great Notre Dame defense and feel really good to great about it.
So I think the two things that Notre Dame has going for it in this game is that like the comment said, like this will be a low scoring game. I feel pretty certain of that. And in these low scoring games, not necessarily bad offense games, but two good defenses. In these games, what it is often decided by is one turnover or one big play. This defense is really good at creating turnovers. There's no reason they can't do that again. And this offense should be so much more explosive than it was last year. And we haven't really seen too much. We haven't seen too much direct evidence. Like we haven't seen too many like huge plays in fall. We saw them back in the spring, but we haven't seen them in fall camp. But just the personnel that they have, and what we have seen them do in practice. Like Jaden Harrison is probably the fastest player on the team. Jeremiah Love is ridiculously explosive. Chris Mitchell is ridiculously explosive. He's a big play threat over the top. And I think if Notre Dame can just stay on schedule, stay out of the third and longs. That does not mean run the damn ball. That means do whatever you can do to not put yourself in third and long. Don't even put yourself in second and long, because that's just a discouraging situation for anyone. Just stay ahead of the sticks, march up and march down the field a little bit, and then really try to pull that trigger. If they stay in those situations, they make Texas A&M defend the line of scrimmage, pull the trigger, create a big play. I agree with the guinea pig clips that screen passes are very much their friend. I also think smashing the ball down A&M's throats with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price up the middle, especially on the right side with Wagner and Shrouth, who have looked good. A lot of things that can play to their advantage, but on the other side, I just can't get these offensive tackles against A&M's edge rushers out of my head. I can't. There's a lot of things going for Notre Dame. There's a lot of things going against Notre Dame. It's really a toss-up game, and it could, if Notre Dame survives this game, I'd probably pick them to go 12-0. I think this is just such a tough game for the Irish, and if they can just escape with a win, the rest of the schedule looks really, really favorable.
Two things there. You did such a good job of building them up, and I guarantee you this chat was loving every minute of it, Jack. And then you just threw back into our face the tackle situation and maybe some of the reasons that we shouldn't be feeling good about this. But you make a good point. If Notre Dame wins this thing, and you have to hope that they're not thinking this way. They're not thinking, hey, if we win this
obviously
one,
the team cannot think this way, or they're going to lose to Northern Illinois or something.
Yeah, but I was literally listening to Andy Staples' podcast this morning, and he had, which does a great job for On3, by the way. Go check him out. He had Stanford Steve of ESPN on talking about Notre Dame's win total over under 10.5. If Notre Dame beats Texas A&M in week 1, I mean, smash the over. I think the low point is 11-1. They're going to go over 10.5, and like you said, maybe even run the table. So It's a massive game. I wish it was being played this Saturday with the way that you were just talking, Jack. Some X's and O's there. I know some people were loving that, but it's not being played this Saturday. We have to move on. We can move on to some more X's and O's type of stuff, though. Some personnel. I know that
I do want to address a comment that just popped up from a
sure.
TXND.
Is it this one?
First of all, I do not think A&M is one of the worst teams in the SEC. I think I don't know if they're top half, like Guinea Pigs Clips comment says. But I think they're much closer to top half than worst team. And
I think they were. SEC, I think they finished 9th in a 16-team SEC in the preseason poll. So they're
going to be much better this year. They're going to be much better this year than they were last year, if nothing else, because Jimbo Fisher is gone and Mike Elko is here. And beyond that, the 14th best team in an 18-team SEC is probably still a pretty tough road out. I know, someone who went to an SEC school. I know the comments are going to come in, but it's a really deep league. Everyone outside of Vanderbilt is capable of beating everyone but the top 5 in any given week, I think, and probably Mississippi State too. At this point, though they obviously have a higher ceiling than that, but it's a really deep league, and A&M I think is going to be in the upper half, and it's do not take this game for granted.
If Mike Elko was able to surprise people at Duke and have one of their best seasons ever, I think he's more than capable of surprising people at Texas A&M. And I guarantee you, he loves it. He wishes they were ranked 12th or 13th or 14th so he could really surprise people. They're ranked 9th, and they're probably going to be even better than that. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they were like a top 6 to 8 team in the SEC. So they might exceed expectations. Notre Dame will exceed expectations if this guy, Jalen Sneed, matches his potential or, exceeds what he's done in the last couple of years. So the question from Ty Webb questions, how has Jalen Sneed looked? Has the game slowed down for him? Because we all know he's an uber fast, quick player. Has the game slowed down for him? And will Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamu-Asa both be starters this season? I'll start with that second one and then let you talk about Sneed, Jack. Bowen and Viliamu-Asa are probably never going to start together because you have a guy named Jack Kaiser who's going to take up space and occupy rent at the will. Bowen and Viliamu-Asa, they're kind of 1A, 1B. I know that is so cliche at so many different positions, but in terms of middle linebackers, I think that's your 1A and your 1B. Bowen's got a slight edge right now. I called it on the message board like a 60 to 40 split. It might be a little bit more than that in favor of Bowen. I don't know how you feel about that, Jack, but those two guys are going to play and play a lot. It really doesn't matter who starts because I think they're both going to play. And then you make plays, you're going to play more and maybe more than the other guys. So they're in a really good spot. Honestly, Jalen Sneed is in a really good spot, even though Notre Dame has really leaned hard into a nickel defense, a 4-2-5, put an extra defensive back on the field that usually yanks Jalen Sneed off the field. But Jack, I do kind of think the answers and the prognosis to these questions pretty good. I think he looks probably as good as he ever has in a Notre Dame uniform. And by way of that, yes, I do think the game is slowing down, and you might see the best Jalen Sneed that you've seen since he's been in South Bend.
Yeah, so my answers to the two questions about Sneed are very good and absolutely 100%. And I think, talking to the coaches about him like that, it's probably the main reason that he looks as good is that the game slowed down for him. He knows what he's doing. He's not making the mental mistakes that he had in the past. He's tackling better. We saw that in the spring. But I think he's still going to be 4th in linebacker snap count this year. A large part of that is because, like you said, nickel defense. Sneed's position is rover, which no longer exists. And beyond that, Kaiser, Bowen, and Viliamu-Asa really have those inside spots down. I think Kingston has looked so good in fall camp to the point where I don't really watch high school film that much. A, it's not my job, and B, scouting high school kids is impossible. I just like to wait until they get on campus to really start to evaluate them. I do read about them, and from what I read about Kingston, I kind of took him for an old school middle linebacker thumper. If there's one drawback, it would have been speed. That is not the case. He is really, really fast. He can be that old school thumper, but he's really fast. He's really quick. And he is more than capable of playing the weak side linebacker position. More than capable. So if they ever want to move Kaiser to Mike and have KVA play will, they can. If they want to have KVA at Mike and Kaiser at will, they can. They can have Bowen and KVA out there. Either of them can play either position. I think so that's three guys who can play either Mike or Will, who have looked really good, one of whom is in his 6th year. I just don't know how many, base defense reps there are going to be out there for Jalen Sneed, to be honest.
I totally agree with that. Not many. Not many.
Yeah. And that's not Jalen Sneed's fault. It's just he frankly doesn't really fit the base system that they play anymore. But where Jalen Sneed,
I think this kind of plays into it too, Jack, is how does Sneed's size compared to Bowen, KVA, and Kaiser? That's probably what's inhibiting him from playing Will, right? It's not that he's small, it's he's rangy and lanky, and you don't look at him and say, oh yeah, weak side linebacker. He's going to run up at the line and get out to the flat, maybe even drop in coverage. I don't know if he's that guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I do think the way they will use Jalen Sneed is as that third down rush cover specialist. You don't know where he's going to line up. You don't know what he's going to do, like a defensive weapon kind of guy. And it's a role they had designs for him last year, but he wasn't ready, right? He wasn't ready.
That's the game slowing down for him. That's the part that needs to happen.
Yes, that is what's going to turn Jalen Sneed from like a sparingly playing guy you don't really notice he's out there most of the time to maybe like 15, 20 snaps a game. Maybe 25 if Notre Dame gets an offense in a lot of passing situations. But again, I really like that 3-man group of Bowen, KVA, and Kaiser at those two base defense linebacker spots. And that's not Sneed's fault. It's just he will play a very niche role in this defense, a valuable one, but not one that's going to see a super high snap count, I think.
You asked me the other day, Sunday, whatever it was, because I watched the defense last week. What are a couple takeaways that you've had from watching those guys? The first one that I told you was, hey, man, the versatility of the linebacker unit, ultra impressive. And you just harped on everything that I saw for 3 days. It was, man, that first day when we got to watch the entire first practice, I did see Drake Bowen rep both in the middle and at weak side. Jack Kaiser in the middle at weak side. KVA was more the middle most of the time, but I think that's just them saying, hey, he might eventually be our best for this. Like in 2 years, when he's a junior, he's probably 100 tackle guy as a middle linebacker. Like I have every reason to believe that that's going to happen for him. And also he's just a true freshman. So maybe that's why you didn't see him bounce around quite as much, but you hit the nail on the head and saying he can do that. He could probably do that better than the other two guys, just in terms of who he is as a recruit and athlete. Like I think I saw somebody on social media today say, man, he's like Manti Te'o, Jalen Smith, just put him on the field, linebacker good. You know what I mean? Like he might be that as a freshman. And the cool thing about it, Jack, is we're going to be able to see if that's a thing because he's going to be out there. And if in those, say he plays like 15 to 20 snaps against Texas A&M, if he looks really darn good in those, that's going to become 25 to 30 in a heartbeat. And I mean, it's nothing against Drake Bowen. It might be 50 by the end of the season if he is Manti Te'o or Jalen Smith good. So I really am intrigued and very interested to see where things go with KVA.
The other thing that I want to point out is like talking to Al Golden last week, I asked him like who are some like the not necessarily starters, but guys you really see as third down rush guys. The big guy he singled out was KVA because he can really play that kind of Maris Leofau type spinner role. A spinner is the word Golden used for it. Like plays inside on rundowns, rushes from the edge on pass downs, can rush from the middle on pass downs. Just somebody you can line up again. we keep going back to the versatility. It is so huge in this position group, and we haven't even mentioned Jaden Osbury, who
I knew you were going to say that name. I
who
knew you were going to say that
yesterday
name, and we should.
yeah yesterday while Notre Dame was working on the third down spear package, the 60B group, Osbury was doing an individual drill. It was him, Don Schuler, and Teddy Rizak, just drilling underneath coverage together. And in that spear package, playing the Aztec third safety position. With the first team, it was Schuler. With the second team, it was Osbury. So he's really a hybrid right now, where they're going to use him again on third downs, a guy who can rush or cover, who can cover from really any different spot in the field. It seems like, and they just have so many chess pieces they can move across the board at that position.
Last thing I'll say is, and I mentioned this in a practice report last week, saw a really cool drill that was just working on backpedaling, quickness, awareness. You had two guys set up about 15 yards away from the player who was about to take part in the drill. He has to backpedal. A GA's got a football. He's either going to throw it to that guy or the other one. And you had to jump and make a break on the ball. And it was really a pass breakup drill for linebackers because it's very tough to get to a ball and you can get both hands on it and come down with it to intercept it. Two guys actually intercepted passes in the 5 minutes straight that they were doing this. I think everybody got 3 to 5 reps. Jaden Osbury was one of them. Teddy Rizak was the other. And so I like that you mentioned that name. I think they're very high on Bodie Cahoon, who's also a freshman linebacker here. So we'll end this conversation by saying, yeah, we just talked about 4 to 5 guys who are going to be very good for Notre Dame at linebacker right now. I think they're recruiting that position at a pretty good clip, and you're going to see some really good things in the future as well. So
I think
last
over
10 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
One more quick thing on this. Over the past 3 years, with the young players on the roster, is there an argument that they've recruited any position better than the linebacker?
It'd be a good column, Jack. Maybe
running back.
Yeah, running back's been good for sure.
Cornerback, but they haven't recruited as much depth.
Right.
I mean, obviously Morrison, Mickey, and Gray are awesome. I think I would go with linebacker.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think those are the 3 that you'd be looking at would be linebacker, running back, cornerback. And if you're talking about depth and what these guys might do over the next couple of seasons, probably your answer.
Combination of talent, diversity, and skill set and depth, I think, is linebacker.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we're going to end this thing by a little oddball question out there, a little fun one, a little less Notre Dame centric, but I know that everyone watching this is a general college football fan as well. So I think we can have a little bit of fun with this one. Thank you, AeroFan624, for always giving us some questions that we can have a little bit of fun with. And he throws out some good, meaty ones when it comes to Notre Dame as well. What non-Notre Dame storyline are you most excited about in college football this year, Jack? I will start, and this is right up your alley. I am excited about the new SEC, man. I get it. I can make this all about Texas because my alma mater is going in. But even if you're a neutral college football fan when it comes to observing what's about to happen in the SEC, how can you not get excited about Georgia going to Texas or Florida going to Texas, Texas playing Texas A&M again for the first time in 13 years? We still get Texas and Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry in Dallas every single year. That didn't go away. That's coming into the new SEC as well. Speaking of Oklahoma, you're a Missouri grad, Jack. They play Missouri this year, right? That's an old Big 12 rivalry that's going to be cool to see. So many awesome games in the SEC this year. I'll just keep talking about Oklahoma just to show you that I'm not making this about Texas. I think they're playing Tennessee, Auburn. Maybe not Tennessee. I know it's Auburn, Alabama, LSU. Maybe it's Tennessee too. The games that we're going to be able to watch, I'm going to have an iPad set up right next to my laptop in Notre Dame Stadium press box every Saturday. And what 2:30, 3:30 SEC game do I get to watch this week? It's going to be fantastic college football viewing, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I will go straight to the 12-team playoff. Actually, first I'll go to just scroll through the Oregon Ducks timeline on Twitter, and just the Duck is just traveling the Big Ten, going to every stadium, like trying to climb the gates and saying, "Let me in."
Did you see that big inflatable duck that they brought to?
Yeah,
Was
and I
that
was just gonna get to that. Like they brought an inflatable duck, like to a river in Indianapolis, and they're planning to take it to as many conference road games as they can. So they're nailing the new conference marketing, I think, better than anyone else. No disrespect to A&M's Pitbull, or not A&M, Texas's Pitbull concert. Very sorry for that confusion. I know that was a grave insult to you.
You're fine.
But so what I'm really most excited to see is the 12-team playoff. Like, not necessarily for the playoff itself, but because I don't know if people realize like how much the quantity of meaningful football games we're going to see in November is going to grow exponentially. Like with the super conferences and with the playoff being what it is, even in the Big 12 and the ACC, like the conference championship races are going to be so much more fun than they were before, and especially in the Big 12, which isn't as strong at the top, obviously, as the Big 10 and the SEC. There are a lot of good, fun teams in there who are now all going to be battling for a playoff spot and a first round bye. It is going to make the college football season much more fun than it already was, and it already was really fun.
And here's the cool thing about that answer for you, Jack, is it does kind of tie Notre Dame in, because I think Notre Dame is part of that discussion of they were always, if this would have always been a 12-team playoff, there are a lot of seasons where Notre Dame was knocking on that door or would have been in. I know they got in twice in the 14, but just imagine if it was 12 teams. And Andy Staples, I'll bring up his podcast again today. He was talking about what if USC just exceeds expectations. I know everyone's writing Lincoln Riley off. That defense, you've been on this, Jack, is probably going to be a lot better than we've seen. Definitely at USC, even some of those Oklahoma teams that made the college football playoff under Lincoln Riley, if it's up there and Miller Moss and the offense is good, could you imagine if Notre Dame versus USC, because I do not expect USC to be playing for a Big Ten championship. So could you imagine if Notre Dame USC had playoff implications for both of those teams in Los Angeles in the last game of the year? I mean, that would be incredible. I know Florida State, Notre Dame a little bit earlier in that month. That's probably going to have college football playoff implications. I think both teams are very much still going to be in the running at that point. So, yeah, that's a very good answer. There's my Southern roots. I just went straight to SEC when I was asked this question by Aerofan earlier. But, yeah, and I think that's because football is literally right on our doorstep. Like, now I actually get to think about these games. I get to think about Texas and Georgia playing each other, whereas in April, I was like, okay, that's happening, but I'm not thinking about that yet. Whereas I was always thinking about a 12-team playoff, and that's a really good point that you bring up, is like we should be thinking about it back then, now, and in November, October, December. Like it's going to be real, and that's a good answer because I like it. 12-team playoff. We've never seen it. We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's just the best way to put it. It's going to. And like you said, you mentioned Notre Dame USC because that's a local angle, rivalry game with playoff implications. Like, who knows? The Egg Bowl could have playoff implications. I mean, that's already one of the most. Yeah,
only in that year. Like I think 2014 is the only year that it had like SEC title game implications.
Yeah, it's just Washington Wazoo could have playoff implications. I mean, there's just a bunch of games that are known for being crazy and fun that now could directly affect who wins the national championship. And I think that's just a great thing for the sport.
Absolutely. I want to go through rapid fire a couple of these questions that I've seen in the chat. I'm blanking on one. So if you know who you are who asked this, Jack, rapid fire, just like quick thoughts on these. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked returning wide receivers who, because we talk so much about Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins, Jaden Harrison has come in. Who among those guys, the returning wide receivers, has impressed you the most in camp?
I think I remember seeing the question. It was like returning upperclassmen receivers. Jaden Thomas.
Yeah.
Yep. Jaden Thomas looked good. Looked very good during practice. Caught a couple deep balls against Morrison. As far as Deion Colsey, I think we've talked about this on the show before. It's great that he's here. He's depth, but unless injuries happen, I don't think he has a path to the rotation.
I totally agree. And you mentioned Morrison. Is he a full? Do you like? is he out there doing everything? And I know that that's tough to answer based on what we have not been able to see, but my answer to this is it kind of like what Mitchell, like what we've seen from Mitchell Evans. I think they're both like full go as of now. Maybe Morrison maybe a little bit more behind, but I think they're playing the long game here, and that they're definitely playing at Texas A&M in a full capacity.
Yeah, we haven't gotten an official update. The last one was there in the return to play protocol, and we're limited, so we don't know if that's changed. But fully expect both of them to be full go by A&M.
Maybe those are the only two that I was seeing in terms of
There was one
rapid
about
fire.
the
This
helmet
is
tech
not so much.
communication.
Yeah, I don't know if that's so much rapid fire, but if you have any quick thoughts
Yeah,
on it.
I mean the answer is I don't know. I mean, coaches have been asked about it and given very generic answers that don't say much. So I truly don't know and can't really say until we get to the games.
Yeah, I wrote a really good column on the well,
If you do say
I
so
thought it was
yourself.
a I was gonna say, I thought it was a
Yeah,
good column. You
I
guys
thought it
can
was a good column too. I thought it was a
you
good column
guys
too.
can see for yourself, but, the tablet usage, 'cause that's one of those things that I just totally forgot about is, hey, these guys can literally go to the sideline, see what they did well, see what they didn't do well right away, and that might be a lot for, uh, college age kids, and that's exactly what Al Golden said. Dylan McCullough seems to think it's going to be a good thing. So you have conflicting opinions there, and I guarantee you the helmet communication thing is the same thing. It might get a bit overwhelming at times, but in the end, more tech is probably a better thing in 2024 in sports. Like,
Yep.
there's probably some old hats that disagree, but I think if you use it to your advantage, it can only be a good thing. So
Correct. I think the rule change I'm actually most excited about is the 2-minute warning.
yeah,
Which by the way, the criticism of that was that it was just an excuse to sell more ads. That is not the case. There will be a commercial. I forget where I read this, but there will be a commercial at the 2-minute warning, but that will get rid of a commercial slot during the rest of the game. So like one fewer sequence where it's, touchdown commercial, kickoff commercial, something like that.
that's not too bad of a trade off because the 2-minute warning has always been something in NFL games that I think I look forward to. It's like one of those things that
Yeah.
you know that's coming, and if you have a big drive, it's helpful in so many situations and kind of makes that more suspenseful because it gives you more time to think about that drive. And
Yep.
so yeah, I like it. And I was reminded of it, Jack, by playing the NCAA or the college football 25 video game. First time I ever played it, it hit the 2-minute warning. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is a thing in college football. Pretty cool.
I know multiple of my friends. I told me that they found out about the 2-minute warning rule by playing the game. I'd imagine
Yeah.
that's the case for a large part of the country that doesn't cover college football or read message boards every day.
Well, I do both of those things, and I was still reminded. So I guarantee you, there is a large faction of the country that was definitely reminded. This is the perfect way to say goodbye to all of these beautiful people, Jack. Is by speaking about someone that I guarantee you a lot of people think is beautiful, and I'll
Yep.
just say that because it was the same thing with Sam Hartman. It's just a thing. Thoughts on the Aussie punter James Rendell? I stood next to him when we were interviewing him in a scrum capacity where there's a lot of reporters kind of surrounding him. Thought he was very impressive in that setting. Probably not as impressive as his 5.1 second hang time punt, which you so diligently captured on your smartphone, on your iPhone. Impressive person, Jack. Impressive punter. I think he's gonna be awesome for Notre Dame for maybe a couple years. They said that maybe he'll get some extra eligibility beyond this season. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think Marcus Freeman said he'll be a weapon. I The one question I think I would have is like, is he, Texas A&M is not a very good place to play your first competitive football game ever, so that would be the one question I have. But I mean, long term, I have zero doubt that in my mind that he's going to be a really good punter for Notre Dame. I think the track record out of Australia, out of Pro Kick, speaks for itself. 8 of the past 11 Ray Guy Award winners, and that's seven punters for 8 Ray Guy Awards. So there's not many questions that pipeline has to answer, and I think Rendell is going to be the latest really good one out of it.
you make a good point about having to do that at Texas A&M because I'll never remember Michael Dixon I think he's still in the league. He might still be punting for
If
Seattle.
he's not in the league, that would kind of surprise me. He was really, really good in the league at
Yeah.
one point. At
Well,
least.
I saw him as a sophomore at Texas take a snap straight off his face mask and cost Texas a game against Oklahoma State. So I'm not putting any kind of juju about Notre Dame and Texas A&M out there about that, but I will say the last thing that we're going to say on this this podcast, right after I say like this video, subscribe to the channel, come back for more of this next Wednesday, and definitely all the videos that we put out between now and then. But Jack, the very last thing that I'm going to say before we sign off, punters are people too.
Of course they are.